gonna be live. We are live. Hi, everybody. My name is Ayize Jama-Everett. I am the co-producer, director of A Table of Our Own, the documentary about Black people and plant medicine. And I am here with Justin Hilton, who is the executive director, founder, amazing visionary person behind SafePlace International, which he'll tell you more about later, and the awesome, amazing crew that is part of A Table of Our Own. We got Reggie Harris here, the man who starts and never stops. We got Charlotte Dewar James. She is floating on water, spirit, and everything awesome. We got Dr. Akua Brown. If you are sick, she is your medicine. We got Karsten Fisher. He is the beginning and the middle, and he will never end. We got Monica. If you need it done online, she is the person to blow your mind. And last but not least, we got Kufi Carey Amara. This wisdom is one that does not stop. We are all here as support for SafePlace International, which is an international organization that works specifically with women with children and queer refugees around the world, giving them not just education, but also dignity, respect, and hope. But I'm going to let my man Justin talk a little bit more about what SafePlace does. Why don't you take it away?
So first, just want to thank you, Ayize, and thank all of you for all the work that you're doing in the world, all the space you're holding, and your willingness to have this conversation, which will be shared with our communities across Africa, and will really be a window into a realm that may not be familiar to them. And so this conversation, know that while we're having it today, and I'm sure it'll be rich and transformative in the moment, we'll keep giving after we end this hour. So thank you for the gifts of your wisdom and the gifts of your presence. And I say thank you for you and your family's incredible support of SafePlace and your personal support of our community, from hawking hundreds of computers to our community so they could get online in the early days, to going on and holding hands with them and loving them up in such a powerful way. So so welcome everybody. And SafePlace International, as I shared with a few people before, is an organization that really works on leadership. We do a leadership training that's 15 weeks of intense trauma work, looking at who we are apart from all the conditioning and the legacy messages that have been taken on, all the lies. Many folks, when they come out, have their clothes burned, are sent away from their families, have to flee their countries, and endure just constant negative messages. So reclaiming their own bodies, their own wisdom, their own connection to purpose, and becoming self-referencing, really finding what their space and destiny is in the world, and then beginning to very practically execute that through acts of kindness and acts of service, and finding their individual path, like what it is for them to do. And we support them in doing that through micro grants of community projects and a lot of just work in continuing to do the work that comes up when you start to break out of all the things that have held you before, when you break your ceilings and when you break all the notions of who you've been and who you've been told you are. So so many questions for you guys, but would love to start with
hold on before we even start. Because we're gonna start, but I just want to put it down for everybody who is watching this. This is a fundraiser. Okay. I know everybody here is like, I know everybody on the camera knows what we're talking about, but a lot of times we do the work and we forget that we require money to get this work done. And unfortunately, we're living in an oligarchy state, and places where that used to rely on, nonprofit status and, things like that. Those old reliances are going away. And so we have to go back to the way that I was raised, which is each one teach one, right? That if you see your partner, your friend, your homie in need, you don't wait for somebody else to help them, you help them. So if you believe that Black queer folks from Africa need some support, hey, SafePlace International, just donate. If you got $5, if you got $10, if you got $20, if you got no money, you can share a link. You know what I'm saying? You can talk to somebody else about this video. Spread the word, and if you can donate, do. You would be surprised what $20 could do. You would be astounded at what $50 could do. When you see what $100 does, it makes you cry. So my gift, I'm giving any profits from the doc. You know, I know we said for a week. I'm just gonna make it the whole month. Like whatever we bring in from the documentary this month, it's going to SafePlace International. I'm gonna throw some of my own cash on top of that. Okay. Anything folks can do to help would be useful. This is just one way that I could think of to try and be useful. Okay. So now we got that part out of the way. I had to do it. I'm sorry. It is about money on some level. I'm sorry. But now we get to talk about the fun part, I think, for both of us, which is plant medicine, refugee status, Africa, colonialism, the whole nine. And I'm going to shut up because this crew here, I know they're going to have some things to say to your question. So
I can't wait for all the things they have to say and the impact that that'll have on all the community members that are going to get to see this video. And thank you. Ayize always remembers the important stuff, as we know. And with the PEPFAR and the USAID freezes, what that meant for our members that are living in refugee camps is they went from 2 meals a day to 1 meal a day, and food insecurity in a camp with 250,000 people means that our population gets attacked more regularly and that violence is sanctioned. We're looking at and responding in the best way we can. We've scaled our interventions times 10 for gender affirming care and for HIV drugs and for basic PrEP, because we're seeing an explosion in STDs since all those things got cut off. So just to ground what Ayize said, $15 a month feeds someone who's in a refugee camp. And for $200, we go in and do acts of kindness in orphanages and townships, which build tolerance and make it safe for our community to move in those spaces, which are the only spaces that they can afford to live in as unofficial, informal settlements. So to date, we've done this year, I think 66 acts of kindness affecting over 6,000 people. And those are all done by our community as volunteers, folks that don't have secure housing themselves, going in and making the food, in a big pot and then serving kids or people in the informal settlement. And the cost of that's $200, $250 to feed between 100 and 300 people, depending on the community. So just a context that I mean, the great thing about being able to contribute to communities across Africa is the impact is so much more than what we would see in a Western country. So and certainly what we see is that there's such a wealth of community organizing and such a willingness to share whatever they have. I was struck in the first weeks when there were medicine shortages, people were splitting their gender affirming care pills, they were splitting their HIV drugs, they were sharing their food. And like, in contrast to my Western friends who were telling me, I'm so depressed, I can't get out of bed, I can't turn on the television. I'm like, wow, you're not actually going to be affected by anything that's happening. The people who are going to be devastated, whose lives are threatened, who can't walk down the street, who can't get medical care, they're already sharing what they have. They're already talking about how can we form clinics where the clinics have closed? How can we mobilize and make sure that people are taken care of? How can we come together? And I think this is the lesson of marginalized communities is their response, their visceral somatic response to crisis and deprivation is sharing and support and collaboration. So with that, I want to turn it over to any of you to talk about anything you want to talk about. But one of the things that I think our community would love to hear is they don't know about plant medicine. Some of the folks have had very limited experience with more regional substances, but in general, there's a pretty strong bias against drugs, and so understanding that, and then the other thing that I think would be really relevant is as we move into this powerful medium that each of you holds, with folks that are actively in a high threat environment, whether that's a war zone like South Sudan or a refugee camp in Kenya, or just living in Uganda where going out in the street could get you killed. How do you work with that internal transformation where often a lot of those trauma responses and ego boundaries come down, and there could be a dissolution for a moment? There can be, a softening of all that. Like, so anything that you'd like to share? No, you're talking directly to them, and certainly to this larger audience that is here because and watching this video because they care about it and feel connected to our family across Africa.
I do a little direction. I know Charlotte and Karsten both have some connections directly in Africa. Charlotte's so excited to talk. She's talking without turning her mute off. Go ahead, Charlotte. Why don't you start?
I was just saying I knew that you were. I felt that directional energy coming my way. I mean, I feel like maybe there's an important framework shift around the conversation that would help to destigmatize some of this, which is to not characterize them as drugs and to characterize them as sacraments, as healing tools, as medicines, which is how they are used in a traditional context in Africa as well. So I think that too is frequently in the psychedelic space, the sort of like modern Western, more medicalized approach. There is medicalized, but even also ritualized. There's like a lot of focus here on Amazonian traditions and contemporary Mexican traditions, which are many tribal traditions. But yeah, those traditions get talked about a lot, and we don't focus on the fact that there's a very rich and broad psychedelic history and over 350 entheogenic plants on the continent of Africa. And there are many traditions that hold these plants and use them as tools of initiation. And what you're saying, this like going back to rescue and reclaim that essence of ourselves that is not touched by the conditioning, the politics, the identity, like all of these things that we need to use to make sense in this scene world. So I'm really curious, how we could have a conversation in this moment and ongoing about reclaiming lineage and local ritual and tradition as tools for this self-actualizing and transformation. There's a lot of complexity in that because many of those traditions are also obviously impacted by colonization. And so the viewpoints on gender expansive identity are not great. There's also frequently, I'm initiated in the Bwiti tradition, and there are definitely like the initiations for men. Interestingly, though, I was in the initiation for women, but men are allowed to do the initiation for women, but women are not allowed to do the initiation for men. So it'd be interesting. It's like there's complexity there, but I wonder like, how there can be, even amongst queer community, like reclaiming of the plants and the traditions of that place, and the initiations of that place and rites of passage of that place, that give us that sense of unending and untouched belonging.
Ooh. I know Karsten has a connection to South Africa. Karsten, wondering if there's anything that came up for you. No pressure, but
yeah, no, I appreciate Charlotte. I appreciate you expanding it like beyond the more like drug aspect or medicalized aspect of plant medicine, right? And just like leading into ritual, leading into community, leading into like the larger fabric of the work outside of like the very small context of it, right? The very small sphere inside like the greater web of plant medicine work, of community, belonging, gathering with each other.
Just real quick, we did see, for those paying attention, we got to pay respect to our elders. Reggie's dad was just in the background right there. Shout out to Reggie's father. Thanks for being here. Thanks for allowing Reggie to be here as well. Just had to put that out there.
And, one of the things that came up for me as you talked about the legacy of plant medicine in tribal communities around the world is a lot of the work that we do that departs from Western psychological models is recognizing the legacy burdens that people carry as they start to do trauma work, and really distinguishing between, this is not your individual psychological framework. It lives there, but these burdens are from, generations of oppression, whether that's gender-based or are based on class or based on your gender identity or how you show up. And love if anyone wanted to speak to how working with plant medicines can start to distinguish, like, this isn't mine. Because what we've experienced in the leadership program is that there can be a kind of rapid throwing off when you realize, like, this doesn't actually belong to me. I'm carrying this burden, and I'm trying to get approval from this oppressive force, but none of this belongs to me. It's not even in my individual psyche. This is something that was put on me. And that insight, under certain conditions, which I think could really be facilitated by plant medicine, could be a catalyst, a pretty rapid catalyst to a whole new perspective and possibilities. So if anyone wanted to speak to that, I think that would be a really valuable wisdom for our community. Oh, is Reggie talking?
No.
Okay.
Reggie, are you talking?
Yeah.
You got to unmute yourself if you're talking, Reggie.
No, I was just talking to my dad.
Gotcha.
Cool.
He was honoring the ancestors. Living.
Yo, my dad is not an ancestor.
He's a living ancestor. We have living ancestors. That's what the children are. I said living. Didn't say he was gone yet. Didn't say he transitioned. Transitioned in and out of the photo, but yeah.
Kubi K, do you want to take a stab at this? Dealing with intergenerational trauma, right? And also intergenerational resource. How does plant medicine play into that?
So I think something that's important to highlight is, in building on the contextualization that Charlotte was speaking to, is that what we're seeing right now, which is often framed as a psychedelic renaissance, Western civilization words that are describing the cultural appropriation of Indigenous and First Nation knowledge, made up words to describe something that's already existed, and that kind of reclaiming is to move beyond the words and the names in such a way that we are able to relate to what is really journey work. And journey is a word that's often used in being in a space of engagement with sacrament, with plant medicine, whatever the word choice may be, right? Because that could be its own conversation as well. But the journey work of recognizing that not one singular instance, not one singular moment of engagement, not one singular thread of deepened awareness and insight that is not integrated, that is not a journey that is supported, not just the moment that you're in engagement, but in learning to integrate that moment afterwards. And so, again, integration, another word, it means a lot of various things to different people as far as its construct, though really what it is about is like to look at it as a meaning making, right? Which is something that we're constantly doing in our lives, even when we're not in a space of engagement. And so to what Carson and Charlotte were speaking to, understanding that there's a way to define that meaning beyond the given language that we are all operating on, right? Because this whole conversation's happening in English, right? So recognizing that this is about stepping onto a choice path, a journey about identity to self, as much as it is about identity to the world around that we are forced to live in. And so just because, as I had someone say, just because you have this great, huge awakening moment that helps you to relate to yourself in a new, different way, if you're doing that in an environment that doesn't feel safe, right, then you are in a space where you're able to access healing, but as soon as you walk out the door again, there's harm. And so how does that not become a cycle? How does that not become bypassing? How does that not become self-aggrandizing? How do you work to keep that from being isolating? If you're the only one in your community that's willing to take that step to explore what is on the other side of this question. There's so much fear wrapped around it from the legacy of the war on drugs that was pumped out by America to the world that has impacted so many communities around the world with drug policy. So to understand that is a journey about deepening an understanding of self. And to your point, when people are in situations where basic necessities are a struggle to obtain, right? Choosing a moment to engage can feel life-threatening, because to what you're speaking to and how you were framing it before, those survival skills are there for a reason, right? Like the ways that people react, and there's kind of a Pan-Africanism about this, because we talk about this in the continental US with the prison to pipeline, institutionalization in the schools, institutionalization in prisons, right? Environments that have food scarcity as well, environments that are lacking for resources and people are in survival mode. You know, a moment of engagement may not actually save their life. It may put it in greater danger. Mm-hmm. So understanding that if we're not coming from working in hand with communities and we're coming from the outside thinking we know what they need to heal, but we are not a part of that community and understand what their struggles are and what they really need to be able to survive, right? If we can't meet them there first, then coming in with plant medicine and they still don't have their basic needs met, are we actually doing more harm than good in the moment? Mm-hmm. So really to kind of what was spoken to when we're, what Charlotte was talking about reclaiming, right? It's a journey. It's not some Disney movie of, you know, it's not even Wakanda, right? It's not like, oh, I survived and the great medicine was saved and I took it and I went and I challenged the great villain and I won, and right, like, and in 2 hours and 15 minutes with credits and a soundtrack, like I turned my whole life around and everything's better.
Mm-hmm. And I'd love to follow that thread, you know, with any wisdom you have or others' contribution, because what we hear from our community members is that when there's no hope and everything around is bleak and getting worse, taking action and contributing is their pathway to meaning. It's their pathway to feeling alive. And taking action is something that marginalized communities are really good at, even under siege. And what we hear again and again is, when I don't have enough food and I go and I feed someone else, my whole internal state changes. And I feel like I can live in this life. I can live under these conditions. Mm-hmm. And that I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that piece, because often, you know, in Western psychedelic experience, there's a lot of contemplation and integration and stillness and integration, like all those things are happening. Whereas what we see across Africa is they're, after a class, they're out there doing action. After a conversation, they're taking action, they're healing their relationships, they're feeding people, they're designing projects. The movement from insight and realization to implementation is much faster in the West. I just love any thoughts you have around that. Yeah,
I'll start it out to give Carrie a chance to think, because I see that mind working. You know, some of my early work was working with many queer, but primarily identified as homeless youth and substance use. And one of the things that was really clear was that, you know, like you said, when folks are in a threatened position, when you are treated as a victim, one of the first things that you can do to gain power is to think of yourself as having agency, right? And I think so often in the medicine space, we think about the person taking the substance as the person who has agency. But I want to expand that out a little bit and say that the person providing food for that journey has agency. The person singing or holding music for that journey has agency. The person preparing that other person for the medicine has agency. The person who works with them after the journey has agency, right? The focus of like the one individual who is having the experience, I feel like that's a Western medical model, right? But I know that if Dr. Okula was struggling, for instance, and everybody on this call came to be with Dr. Okula, maybe part of her work was like needing some medicine, that's medicine for all of us, right? We're all going to get a benefit from that. So, kind of like what folks were saying earlier, sort of repositioning this idea of like, this is a clinical way in which we take drugs to make people feel better and heal problems, blah, 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 to switch that and be like, in joining in community, one of the options we may have is that one or more people may need to work with some medicine, but we are all part of that medicine. One of the things I think I've heard everybody in this thing say is that we are the medicine, right? The compounds allow us access to realize that, perhaps, but to be in deep community with each other is the medicine. That's why I continue to mess with these people all the time. I mean, you got people moved out to Texas, they still part of the clique. You got people moved away from the Bay, came back, still part of the clique. We got people in Baltimore, still part of the clique, right? Once we're connected, why would we let go? And I think that's a message that I've gotten from the medicine, I'll say. I don't know if anybody else wanted to jump in on that one.
Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Reggie kept calling me and was booting me out of the chat.
I didn't call you. You said, Monica, I didn't do that.
First of all, happy Pride, everyone. Thank you, Ayize, Justin, you all for kicking off Pride with me, especially making it a melanated Pride. Just want to say first and foremost, the Pride started as a rebellion and a movement that was centered in Black and Brown folks mobilizing each other. So this conversation is just so fruitful. Something that comes to my mind, and I didn't capture everything that was said because of the interruptions, but something I've been thinking about is when we talk about plant medicine, medicinas, sacraments, whatever you want to call it or identify it as, nature is queer. That's something that has come up a lot in conversation, the concept of nature being queer, and the medicine really allowing you first to connect with yourself and your authentic truth and your authentic self. And so when, I've met many queer folks who said like their first, freeing of themselves and their identity and their expression and who they choose to love was really opened up by working with the medicine and allowing them to accept themselves because society hasn't allowed them to do that. And so when you're able to work with the medicine, especially from a queer perspective, it allows us not to just connect with ourselves, but as Ayize mentioned, being able to connect with one another in community. And the journey work is a very personal and intimate relationship, but it also allows us to interconnect with each other and the world around us. And so for me, the medicine has allowed me to have more capacity to understand the world around me because I've understand the world within me.
Wow. Amazing.
I think something that comes through for me as well as you say that, Monica, is like, I think the community for me, all the people in this screen have created a space where I can understand myself more so better, right? So that I can then give into my community, kind of like almost an inverse of what you're saying, Monica, as I feel like what community has been for me, right? Yeah, and I think just like the beautiful gift that it is to be Black and also queer is like creation and like doing and being is just like an innate, like that creative juice, and so I think going back to kind of what you were saying, I say the community has given space to like sit and be quiet, where everyday life is like always constantly pushing to like do something or move this place or do this thing or survive in this way. The community gives the framework and the space to to create, to think, to be.
One of the things that arises. So go ahead, Reggie.
Oh, sorry, jumped in there real quick. No, I was just gonna. I think that's an important point, right? And just kind of tapping to what I was saying before is the environment that we're engaging in and how community is medicine. And that would, I think, is a stark difference between what does it look like to introduce what we're talking about as far as medicine, as far as plant medicine and sacrament and earth medicines into communities when you're talking about the African diaspora as opposed to kind of the westernized appropriation model that is glamorized, is the moving away from hyper individualism and realizing that we are able to be in the ways that we are because of our community, because of the ways that, like, anyone that's in a marginalized community, anyone that's feeling the weight of oppression in any society understands that if they don't have community, they're not going to make it, right? Like, this is something that is just a fundamental fact. So to what you're speaking to of how individuals form and build community, even in some of the harshest environments of, I'm sharing my HIV medicine, I'm sharing my gender affirming medicine, like, even though we're in an environment that doesn't want to affirm us, I'm affirming you with the medicine of community by sharing of what little I have. And that is such in its own self. That's what I mean by the environments we have around us when we're integrating. That becomes something so affirming to what Monica was speaking to of, I've now gained this awareness of myself that exposes the lies that I've internalized that were given to me about how I should feel about myself from external value structures, that I'm able to build my own worth within myself for who I am, and then have the community around me that affirms that, so that I have the strength to take the next step and to meet the new day into owning who I am authentically. And even if I have to do a little bit of throwing the dance shoes on here and there, because, you know, we live in societies where we got to make the money, right? And we gotta pay the bills, and we got to buy the medicine, and we gotta put clothes on our back and food in bellies. And some of us are caregivers, so we have to stretch our ability to survive to help give shelter and cover to others, right? Even if it's chosen family. And so that in and of itself becomes beautiful medicine. And for myself, when I was living in New York and I hit a rough patch and I had just enough to be able to pay rent, and that's all I had. And so at least I had a food over my head and a couple of friends who could slide me a couple of dollars to get some top ramen and make some simple grilled cheese sandwiches. I was feeling a kind of way about myself because of the narrative of society, especially living in New York, talking about, you know, the belly of the beast where money rules all. Yet at that time, I was afforded, and I say afforded, I was afforded an opportunity to go to a food line to feed unhoused people on Thanksgiving.
Mm.
The look on their faces to receive that meal, and what I was feeling about myself, and what I was feeling about how I was internalizing external values of my own worth, to be able to do a kind act for someone like that, and for them to provide some reciprocity of feeling affirmed that someone was humanizing them, someone was willing to show up and give love and care for them, just to your point, shifted everything about how I was looking at my own struggles, shifted everything about what it really meant to be successful. And that is the power of community.
Following the thread of what the four of you shared, and I love how you described that awakening moment of being the provider of the food, and you know, for many of our community members, there's a feeling that they don't exist, that they exist only relative to the conditions that they're trying to survive, and they're defined by the church's views on them, the family's views on them, the culture's views on them. In that awakening to existence that you described in the food line is something that also extends to just walking down the street and realizing that you change as an individual every space that you're in. You know, as you move through space, you exist as an individual, and I'd love to hear, you know, your thoughts on that, because often in the West, we talk about plant medicine to acknowledge that we don't exist. Whereas in a lot of our environments where folks have been so systematically oppressed, really realizing that I somatically exist. As I move through space, I impact my environment. I exist as a sovereign being, independent of any input. And I love, like, if anyone wants to speak to that kind of awakening of, I'm here in this body. I'm constantly creating legacy, creating ripples out, as you described, this collective that's happening. Anything you want to say about that? Or,
I mean, I'm going to ask Reggie to speak to that, just because if there is anybody I know that like claims themselves despite whatever is going on around them, and like makes like their presence known and then makes space for other people, that's Reggie. So Reggie, how do you do that?
Excuse me. All right. Can you frame the question in like a small block? Because I heard what Justin said. And I kind of think I understand what you're saying, but could you just sum it up for me, and then I'll go?
How do you claim yourself fully on a regular basis, despite all the people outside of you telling you ain't shit?
I mean, how do I claim like, yeah, what else am I gonna do? That you all know me. I think that, how do I claim? I don't think that I have any choice. I think that if I was moving around in the community and nobody knew me, and I didn't have any anchors, and I didn't have anybody to check my behavior, then it would be easy for me to decide, okay, the winds are blowing this way, it's time to switch up. But I mean, other than moving around as a person with some level of integrity, if I want to continue popping up in this community that we have developed, what choice do I have? What would you do if, I claimed that I believed X on this issue, and then when it came time for me to stand on this issue, I chose Y, and then I popped up in front of you or any of you all? What would you do?
Well, you know what I would do, but
the word exactly.
The word that you used was integrity.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can talk about like that development. I mean, I'm not trying to bring your dad into every conversation, but I wonder, like, is that a legacy thing in terms of like coming from people with integrity? Is it something you have to develop yourself? How do you claim that, in the midst of all the people who want you to conform to be a different way?
Dad, how you feel about integrity? Okay. He's saying, my dad's saying integrity is important. I've not seen my dad operate outside of integrity. And it's just, I mean, yes, we can say it's handed down, but at the end of the day, my dad doesn't live here. He doesn't see what I'm doing. I choose to show him and introduce him to what I'm doing because I've moved around in a way that allows me to hold my head up high. But again, I think, yes, it's easy for me to have integrity because I move around in a community where integrity matters. It's my choice to opt into community because to opt into integrity because I value you all. When we hopped on, hey, let's go hang out in a second. We all talk, we all know each other. For me, I know this might not be the exact answer that you're looking for, but my answer is, that's the importance. The importance of having a community is because it holds everybody accountable. Mm-hmm. The times that I've been burned moving around in the space, it's folks who either aren't attached to a community, aren't attached to my community, or aren't attached to a community where integrity matters.
Mm-hmm. No, that's real. That's exactly what we wanted. Dr. Cool, I see you being quiet over there. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in if you wanted to. No pressure.
No pressure. It's all good. Yeah, y'all all got a lot of big words, and a lot of deep thoughts. I usually
meanwhile, you're the only one with letters in front of your name.
I have to put that there to give me some respect in this room, right? To keep up with y'all. I'm like, yeah. I liked the question that you posed about how do you like maintain yourself? How do you keep yourself whole, true to that inner light that you know that shines within you? And I agree that it has to do with having community and having folks around who can hold you accountable, but it also is a little bit addictive when you are your true self and you let your true light shine and find people who want more of what you really are. I find that it is it's a little it encourages you to do that more. The only way to have true relationships is to let people see the real you. And so once they love you as you are, it gives you space to continue to show that light and continue to shine in that light, and attract the people who can hold you to that, to be that person and to grow into that container, that vessel that let that spirit that is within you really fill up your container of this body and this being. And can you do it all the time? Maybe Reggie can, but I can't. I will say, because I don't think I want everybody. I know everybody aren't ready to hold this gift that I am. So I think I know that I definitely move in silence until I feel like there is some sort of safety around me. So maybe I can understand. Maybe that's why I stay a little quiet on the chat until I know that what's really going on, feel what really is happening in the room, and then decide if they are worthy of seeing the real me. So I would let people know, especially folks who are, going through some shit. Try to find those little spaces, little safe spaces, little places, whether it be with other people. Usually it's best with other people, whether it be through sacraments or plant medicines, whether it be through music or singing, whether it be through style of dress or any way that you can show and share a little piece of yourself to get that echolocation, to find the people who respond to that and who will send that back to you. Do it in the way that you can, in a way that feels safe to you, in a way that is truly honoring who you are as a person, as a being. That's my 2 cents.
Nah, that's $1.50 at least. I mean, I'll say cool. Like you came up with a really good point about yourself as a gift. And I think that's something that when you're in a refugee camp trying to take a class on a cell phone, it's really hard to remember that you are a gift to the world. And I think that's something that plant medicine has given me, I'll say, right? That the connection with like that I'm okay, right? That I'm more than okay, that I'm good, right? That I'm worthy of love and respect, right? I mean, maybe y'all grew up with that. I didn't grow up with that, right? I know that of the 1,800 people that are going to have access to this video, a lot of them didn't grow up with that. I'm not trying to advocate for plant medicine or whatever, but like that is something that I think it can offer, is a connection with spirit, with ancestors, with elders, with beings. Like I told one person the other day, like, well, what about your queer ancestors? Blew their mind. They're like, what do you mean queer ancestors? I'm like, those that came before you that was queer. They were like, oh snap. Because they had this notion of all the ancestors being these old dudes, sitting around a fire, like making them feel bad about themselves, right? And I'm like, no, like you had people before. So like any connection that we can make, like folks are saying, through music, through medicine, through clothing, through whatever, to remind us that like we are not the first ones to be here, that we come from a lineage, and that there are spirits and people and communities that are invested in us going forward and being happy, healthy, and sane. Whatever we have, whatever supports that, I'm for that. You know what I mean?
I'd love to hop in here, because I feel like what we're talking about fundamentally is the wound of belonging, or the trauma of not belonging, right? You talked about people being pushed from their homes, from their families, having their clothing and their belongings burned, right? Having this attempt at an erasure, an erasing of their existence. And I don't know that the answer to that is always individual self-actualization. Like, we keep talking about this still from a very like Western individual viewpoint, that we need to like be our own person and figure out our identity in order to have a sense of belonging. And I would say that most of us over here have been doing that for a long time, and a lot of us still do not feel a sense of belonging in this world. And what Ayize is saying about working with plant medicine is this understanding that you belong to something much greater than just this reality, that there is an entire unseen force of ancestors, of elements, of spirit guides, of all of these pieces that give you a greater sense of belonging to the greater fabric of existence, and that you are a gift, that you have a purpose. And two, when we look again, like going back to this idea of rite of passage or ritual, especially in an African context, really in all indigenous contexts, it's this like naming that you are an incredibly important and unique manifestation of spirit in this world. And also, you're not separate from anything else or anybody else in your village. Like, everyone has that. And so what you're talking about around like altruism, generosity being a literal prescription against depression and anxiety and this epidemic of loneliness that we're in, which our elders and ancestors could have told us for millennia, but is also backed by science now, and research and study, that altruism is the antidote to depression. I wonder if like there's actually if this audience that's watching this has like a huge leg up over all of us in what it is to actually recreate the village, because you're not so torn and so far from it. And it sounds like that's happening in so many ways in the communities that you're working in, and people are finding this way to recreate family and to recreate resource sharing and mutual aid, and remembering that like constant mirroring and witnessing that happens when we're amongst us, and being seen, like Dr. Ku was saying, is this like, that is an immense gift that so many of us are attempting to find through this reclamation of plant medicine and ritual and ceremony and ancestor work. So I just want to name, like, in this conversation, that we're still, I think it's just like natural, but we still like put these frameworks on it, that maybe we don't need to imprint that on the community, the folks that are listening to this, because that is not as perturbed for them yet. And then the other piece that I wanted to name too is I feel like we frequently talk about journey work and transformation as this like big, it has to be some big journey, and we come out of it and we're like, everything's changed and now I can't fit it into my life and there's no integration, and I have like fully dissolved the ego. And what I've been finding to be really powerful in our communities especially is more consistent, much lower dose usage, like microdosing, like what's called psycholytic dosing, but definitely the microdosing. And working with other plants, like working with tobacco, working with just like local herbs. There's just like a lot of beauty in the journey work and in the initiatory like doses of medicine. And there's also a lot of power in, again, like re-indigenizing and reclaiming ancestral ways of like regularly every day having practices that remind you of that, and not these like big peak experiences. So I just wanted to offer that as well as like maybe a way to find a way to integrate this practice into communities that are facing so much active harm and active oppression and active marginalization is to bring it in. I mean, our lines, our lineages don't need more harshness usually. So there could also be a lot of power in the gentle reintroduction as a way to reclaim ancestral resilience and gifts while also addressing the ancestral trauma.
I want to just piggyback off of what we're just speaking to in this moment in the share, bringing it back around to how Monica helped us acknowledge how we come to this moment, right? Marsha P. Johnson, right? It was folks looking for community and looking for safe spaces, understanding that they were creating in their own ways, and to like what Dr. Kua is speaking to, were people they felt safe enough to show themselves with, to be their true selves, and the importance of that. And it was about places like that we have this Pride Month that we're speaking to. And yeah, low and slow, to what Charlotte's speaking to, right? Like, especially if we're talking about folks who have very extreme and severe environments that they're having to navigate already. You know, I'll often say for myself and how I'm navigating things in my life that, you know, the nervous system can be the boss, right? And so, like, what is okay for my nervous system right now, not what is someone said is what I should be doing and prescribed for what healing is supposed to look like. And especially if unfamiliar with altered states of consciousness. And by the way, we've been doing this, I think Victor in the doc film speaks about this. A lot of the things that support journey work are things that we already have within our culture, right? And so when we're talking about Pride Month, like dance floors, spaces where people were able to be themselves and to express themselves and allow that energy to just move through them and out them, in a way that they don't have other spaces to do that before. And like, culture is medicine as much as community is medicine. And I think if we're talking about pride, if we're talking about LGBTQAI+, like, culture as safe space, culture as medicine is something that can be really powerful and transformative even before you get to the moment of like engagement in an altered state, because the dance floor can be an altered state for a lot of people that allow them to find themselves, to express themselves, to feel safe enough to show up in the world as who they are, to even attempt to attract people to accept that. And that can even be the case of, oh, I went there, but I didn't get on the dance floor. I didn't feel comfortable yet. Oh, I finally made it on the dance floor. I finally danced. Oh, somebody danced with me and I felt awkward, but they said, I hope I see you next time. And now somebody like is looking forward to seeing me, which feels new. You know what I mean? Like, that can be medicine. That culture, that community, that kind of low and slow of again, piggybacking on what Charlotte's speaking to, is like, you get to pick the pace of this. It's not a case of like, you signed up for a roller coaster and you have to open up with a big, great journey. And then whatever that does to you, you're stuck with having to continue to kind of outmatch each journey. Like, to your point, that's such a westernized, hyper individualized, like, the only way to do this is one way. Meeting yourself where you are, right? Moving at the speed of trust and the speed of medicine with yourself, and going low and slow, and understanding that like, culture is medicine. And that is how so many of us are first finding ways to explore our own identity within the collective, and again, find that chosen family, which so many of us have to do. And I would think, like, to the audience that we're speaking to, often have to do as well. Even if it's just that one little piece of clothing that, you know, when I put this one thing on, I feel like this is the thing that like connects me to me. And I only wear it inside because I don't feel safe enough to wear it outside yet and show that part of me. But there's this thing I went to and I wore it and somebody complimented me on it. And like the power of that is so rich in our own culture. It's nothing we have to look outside of ourselves as the African diaspora to find. There's so much richness in that and within ourselves that we don't need somebody to frame that narrative for us. Like, we don't need somebody to like steal the coolness that we already naturally embody to then try to sell it back to us. Like there's so much innate internal wisdom in what that is for us, that like so much of culture that we look at today becomes from communities that are oppressed, especially at the intersection of pride and Black. And so much of what is getting built off from that are people that were doing exactly that.
Yeah.
If there's not a place for me to find myself, I'm gonna build a place and I'm gonna invite others.
That's it. Yeah. What y'all are talking to is the thing. Like whenever I talk to the graduating class at SafePlace International this last time, but I've talked to them a few times. Every single time I have to tell them, I'm like, y'all are the coolest motherfuckers out here. Like, don't try and be like this. Be like you, and just know how dope you are. Like, and I think just hearing what you're saying, Kubi Carey, what you're saying, Charlotte, what you're saying, Monica, Akula, right? It's just that, and you too, Carson. Just that, like, once we locate ourselves as the center of power, as the center of belonging, as the center of respect, everybody else can do what they do, but they don't have power over you. Right? That like once we like, if I'm foul with Reggie and Charlotte, I'm messed up for real. I know that. Right? And I gotta get right with them. But a boo-boo the fool down the street who looks at me and is like, oh, Ayize sucked. I don't care. I'm cool with Reggie and Charlotte. Right? Like I don't, right? So who are our references, right? Who are we looking at to say whether or not we're okay? And I think if who we're relying on are people who, no matter what, don't have our best interest at heart, we're fucked. You know?
Amazing.
We only got like 2 or 3 more minutes. Do you have any other big things?
No, I'm just so moved and so grateful for all of your wisdom and this quality of electric availability and immediacy is something that's blasting through the screen from all of you, and something that's really apparent with bad internet and load sharing across 29 countries. And that availability for life, that availability to be both receptive and active at the same time and engaged and changeable. It's such a magic quality, and really, I feel like this conversation has been one where we used really, really powerful life trajectory changing words, but the energy and the availability and the openness from each of you is such deep medicine without any words. So thank you for your potent transformative words, and thank you for the deep yes that you come with, and the availability and the willingness to be fully here, because that in itself, that somatic embodying, is this invitation into life, into fully living who we are and breathing and connecting and being animated by a force that is beyond definition. So grateful for all that you've offered in this hour. It's been so hugely generous.
I don't know if anybody else got any final words, anything they want to say, any offerings to the group.
I love y'all. Say I love you to your friends. I love y'all. For real. So often we can be in spaces where we only see what's right in front of us, and to have beautiful people that can reflect our beauty back to us that we may not be able to often recognize in moments when we're just in it is love y'all.
I just wanted to say thank you again. And if I had the chance to speak directly to folks who are refugees or who are in these spaces, is that don't forget that the medicines that we're talking from come from your own backyard. They come from your ancestors. So something that you said, Ayize, is, sometimes folks are like on the camera and, coming in class and it's like spotty Wi-Fi, and it's hard for them to remember like their worth and their value. But like, you are the most valuable people, and that is why so much has been taken from you. And so I hope that this conversation allows you to return to yourself.
hold on. I guess my little exiting thing, since we have an international audience, I would feel remiss if I did not say that true freedom to all the colonized states, including Palestine. True freedom and equality.
Ashe.
For real. Yes.
Thank you for gathering us. And I hope that everyone that is watching has an opportunity to remember themselves.
And lean into the things that make you smile. Follow the things that bring you joy. Those are the real markers of what is best for you and what will really help you to be your fullest self. Lean into that. Lean into the good, those pockets when you find them. And sending you much love.
Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. I know y'all are like, what is Ayize talking about? What is this weird thing? I really appreciate you trusting me on this. Folks from SafePlace, we love you. You are not forgotten. You are not displaced. You are not remembered. We remember you. We love Africa. We love our African people. We love our queer African brothers and sisters and transgender individuals. We see you. We know you. We want the best for you. Our hearts go for you. What coins we have, we can give to you. Whatever we can give, that is what we are giving. We want you safe. We want you healthy. We want you strong. We want you protected. We're doing what we can. Please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. You are so important to us. We love you. Those of you who can, SafePlace International, please donate. It goes directly to the people for real. Thank you,
guys.
everybody.
Love you.